Good morning, everyone. It is 11 o'clock. We're going to wait 2 to 3 more minutes for the governor to join us to kick off the business briefing today. Good morning, everyone. It is 11:01, and we're just going to wait a few more minutes for the governor to join us to kick us off here today. Thank you for being here. Good morning, everyone. This is Michelle Comer, Commissioner of Commerce. We will be getting started in just a few moments.
Hi, Michelle. Can you hear me?
Good morning, Governor. We will get started. Hi, thanks for joining us today. And I want to say welcome to the more than 2,200 people that have joined us for this discussion today. I'm honored to pass this over to the Governor of North Dakota, Doug Burgum.
Thanks, Michelle, and good morning, everybody. Thanks for dialing in. This is historic times that we're living in, something we're going to remember the rest of our lives. And it's also, uncharted territory. We've never been in a global pandemic before. We've never been in a position where we've had government asking the private sector to actually shut down their commerce to help with a international and national, state, and local health emergency. And we've never had the kind of federal response that we've ever had before, including the Great Depression. The dollars that have been passed in the STEM 1, 2, and 3, dwarf anything that it was labeled the New Deal back in the 1930s. So this is an economics lesson and a health lesson that's still unfolding and will be written about in history books for decades and maybe a century to come. But in the meantime, we're right in the middle of it, and you as business leaders and some of you wearing multiple hats as local officials as well, we get to navigate our way through these interesting and uncharted waters. Right now, as a state, we're doing quite well through that navigation in terms of where we are in slowing the spread, where we are in terms of building our health capacity, where we are in terms of testing, which is a key component for us now as we work on containment and mitigation, but testing is going to be a part of the new normal going forward to help us get our economy back going again. I do want to say that I really am grateful for the leadership in our business community, the innovative new approaches, the response, the way people have been taking care of their team members, and the way we're navigating these challenges that none of us had experience before going through anything like this. So kudos go out to all of you. The goal for today, we've got a number of presenters. They're going to talk about the enormous resources that are there. And one thing I'd say would encourage all of you is to take the time. Thank you for listening in today, but take the time working through our Department of Commerce and through SBA and through others to really understand what the the components that are going to be talked about today, because whether it's the record support that's coming through unemployment insurance, whether it's a new program called the Payroll Protection Program and the Fed stuff, whether it's direct payments to individuals, whether it's forgivable loans to small business, and really that's, grants disguised as loans, and they're not even that disguised. The interest rates are super low and you may not even have to pay the loan back. I guess I've never thought of that as a loan if you don't have to pay it back. And not little amounts of money, significant amounts of money for an individual family or individuals. And then also the expansion of this, because when people think about unemployment insurance, the questions we got for the first 2 weeks, well, what if I'm a sole proprietor? What if I'm a gig worker like an Uber driver, or somebody works out of my home building websites for someone and I haven't been paying into unemployment insurance? Well, under these new programs, even the gig workers are covered. And if you're, someone who is like at a booth license renting and doing, haircuts where you may not even have set up your own LLC or sole proprietorship, there's potential benefits for all of these folks as small businesses, and even nonprofits like a local hospital may, if they've got less than 500 employees, may qualify for some of these SBA programs. And so it's just so much broader in terms of whether it's individual workers or whether it is nonprofits. And so again, I encourage everyone to, as business leaders, on behalf of your own team members and folks, to make sure that everybody understands that some of these forgivable loans are based on, the forgiveness component is based on people actually keeping their employees on. So the one thing I know, when we've got this now super rich unemployment benefits, there might be a rush to just, hurry up and lay everybody off and say, hey, go get a check, a really nice check, or, for $1,200 a week from the unemployment system quickly. But I would encourage people, before you make any rash decisions on layoffs, spend a day at least understanding all these components of these unfolding SBA rules to make sure that you can qualify for the forgivable loan components if you choose to. So that is the top line I'm going to say. But again, I'm going to turn it over and let the team start going through the presentations they have. And again, we've got lots of ways to get answers afterwards, but if they're health related, health.nd.gov, North Dakota Health Department. The one-stop shop for information is ndresponse.gov, where we've got everything related to COVID crisis up. And again, encourage you as business leaders to help get accurate information out, help encourage your team members and people in your community to take this thing seriously. It is a very serious health threat for people that are over 65 with underlying conditions, 15 times more deadly than the flu. This is not the flu season. And we have, again, can be grateful that it does not affect our young people. But I, again, want to get a shout out if there's any of you that are also involved or married to or working with teachers or people in the education system, because we've got as of yesterday, all 175 school districts were back teaching the over 113,000 kids in our state. This is something that other states haven't been able to figure out how to do, this quickly or this fast. So credit goes to everybody involved in K-12 education for us to be able to be delivering distance education as of yesterday in all districts in the state. That took a huge effort, but that's an example of how in this unusual time, every business has got to come up with a new innovations and new approaches and new standard operating procedures, and so does government. And what we're doing at state government, what we're doing in K-12 are great examples of that. So thank you. Keep innovating, stay healthy, stay informed, keep being a great leader in terms of helping other people understand the importance of keeping physical distance. That's the key one, more than 6 feet apart. Hand hygiene is another one way to stop the community spread. And anything you can do to slow the spread will make sure that we've got the healthcare capacity to save lives among those that are most vulnerable. So thank you for being part of saving lives, and thank you for making sure that you're informed. lots and lots of bad. As I said, the only thing that's spreading faster than the virus is bad and inaccurate information that's out there in social media and on the internet. So as leaders, please take the extra responsibility to help educate your teams and your team members on accurate information. And that's one of the ways we can move through this safely and productively. So thanks for all you do. I'll turn it back over to Michelle.
Thank you, Governor. Well, again, welcome to our third business briefing. Today, we are focused on assisting you through navigating your business through these unprecedented times. I'm Michelle Comer, as the Governor said. I serve as the Commissioner of Commerce, and we have more than 2,200 people joining this discussion today as of numbers a few seconds ago. With the CARES Act having been signed into law this past Friday, the 27th, this week's topic is what you need to know about the CARES Act today. And our message to you, like in the weeks past, is that you aren't alone. North Dakota businesses, as I've said before, are not anonymous entities. You are our neighbors and our friends. And because of that, the Department of Commerce has been working around the clock with other state agency leaders and partners like GNDC so that we can weather this public health crisis together and manage the economic impact and return to prosperity as soon as possible. While we haven't yet seen the peak of the coronavirus or the valley of the economic impact, it has been said that these next weeks will shape how the coronavirus impacts the economy. That's because the more quickly we understand the resources that are available to us as a statewide community, the more quickly we can recover. And it's our goal to help you do that, so we will stand together as our nation recovers. I want to express some gratitude to our congressional delegation. Representatives from Senator Kramer, Senator Hoeven, and Representative Armstrong's office do join us today, and we're so fortunate for this team that is working hard in DC to make sure that North Dakota is positioned as well as possible and for their accessibility during this critical time and always. I also want to thank the team that we're calling the Economic Resiliency Team that's made up of leaders of state agencies who have banded together to assist you so you don't have to navigate this system alone. Joining us from that team today are Al Jager, our Secretary of State, Ryan Rauschenberger, our Tax Commissioner, Lisa Cruz, our Banking Commissioner, Erica Thunder, our Commissioner of Labor and Human Rights, Tom Bodine, the Deputy Commissioner of Agriculture, Tammy Miller, the Chief Operating Officer from the Office of the Governor, Justin Messner, our coordinator from the Department of Emergency Services, and of course, our Insurance Commissioner, John Godfried, who will join us today, along with Brian Clipfill, the Executive Director of Job Service, North Dakota, and Worker Safety Insurance. Next slide, please. We have to start with a little disclaimer. Today, we will cover selected provisions of the CARES Act and will provide resources to businesses and individuals that are adversely affected by this pandemic. As you may know, over the last several weeks, an unprecedented amount of regulation has been drafted and passed by Congress and published, providing more than $2 trillion of economic stimulus aid. The CARES Act itself contains 6 titles and it is 880 pages long. Many questions of implementation remain unanswered. At this time, final guidance hasn't even been issued, and many questions will be answered in the days to come. It is even possible that some guidance delivered in this presentation may change, but we will make those updates as quickly as we receive them. I also want to advise you that I am not providing you legal advice nor financial advice, and you should consult with your attorney, your accounting, tax, and financial advisors, and your bankers before making decisions regarding your business. Next slide. So our goal today is to make you aware of the financial resources that you might consider. This decision, as I mentioned, should be made in consultation with your financial advisor. This slide deck will be available after today's call, and I want to make note that it also serves as a resource kit because everywhere you see text underlined, it includes a helpful link to something that has been vetted for quality and accuracy. And as the governor said, we have learned even in the last several days that you have to exercise extreme caution with the resources you are consulting. Because of the pace at which the guidance is developing, we are finding that a number of the resources are simply inaccurate or out of date. So please use only reputable sites. We recommend ours at ndresponse.gov, and at the end of this presentation, we will provide you another list of resources that are fact-checked and vetted several times a day. Next slide, please. This presentation was designed with your questions in mind. If you attended last week or the week before that, and even coming into this week, you had the opportunity to ask questions upon registration, and we have designed this presentation to be as responsive as possible to those questions. Going forward, we've created an email address, businesshelpcovid19@nd.gov, where you can submit questions. We won't be providing financial guidance, but we can direct you to resources. Next slide, please. Also, for those of you listening today, we ask that you share, that you pass the word on about the resources you hear about today to those that are not able to be with us. Also, a recording of this call with the materials will be available for later use. So please spread the word to North Dakota businesses through your social media, your business, your trade groups, and any other way. Next slide, please. We want to take a moment to recognize our statewide community and remind ourselves not to forget about the good that we are seeing in communities. And we would like your help in continuing this movement that we're calling In This Together ND, that honors the acts of selflessness and generosity that we see every day. From supporting small businesses to chalk art, you name it, please share those acts of generosity. You can live tweet during this session, tag us, In This Together ND. Next slide, please. All right. So the agenda for today, we're going to start with an overview of the stimulus package just for context. And then our real deep dive focus for today begins with a high level of the Coronavirus Families First Response Act, or the CFFRA. We're going to talk about the Emergency Injury Disaster Loan. The acronym is EIDL, which I find ironic because we are anything but idle in our response. We'll talk about the Paycheck Protection Program, which we will call PPP because you can't really say Paycheck Protection Program too fast. And we'll also talk about expanded unemployment programs and benefits and direct payments. We will cover a few illustrations, but please sign up for next week's session, because next week, after the guidance that we expect to be issued comes out, we will be talking about how to apply the CARES Act after there's more fully developed instruction. And then we'll end today with a few reminders and closing remarks. Next slide, please. All right, for the stimulus package overview, again, just for context, as the governor said, there have been 3 phases of the economic stimulus package. Phase 1 was called the Coronavirus Preparedness and Response Act. Phase 2 was the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. And phase 3 is now called the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, or the CARES Act for short. There is speculation that there may be a 4th package focused on infrastructure. Phase 1 was passed with nearly unanimous support. It was signed into law on March 6th, and it provides $8.3 billion of emergency funding, mostly to federal agencies to help build the infrastructure needed to provide support to phase 2 and phase 3. Phase 2 was signed into law on March 18th, and we will discuss that from the employer's perspective at a high level today in a few moments. Phase 3 is the CARES Act. It was signed into law just this past Friday on March 27th, and that's where we're going to spend most of our time today. The CARES Act aims to address the economic disruption caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, and it authorizes up more than $2 trillion in government spending to accomplish that goal. Phase 4, again, there's much discussion about a 4th stimulus package. The discussion as of today is that there would be included funding for infrastructure projects. And at the Department of Commerce, we are watching that conversation very carefully so that we again can bring you information that applies to you when the time is right. Next slide, please. All right, at a high level, the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. This act creates obligations for employers rather than providing employers aid. And I wanted to make sure that at a high level, everyone is aware of these obligations because the FFCRA went into effect yesterday. It will remain in effect until the end of the year. The act contains 4 requirements that apply mostly to businesses. The first is the expansion of FMLA. It applies to businesses with fewer than 500 employees until the end of 2020. These employers will be required to provide employees with up to 10 weeks of paid FMLA. The first 2 weeks of the normal 12-week FMLA leave may be provided unpaid, but an employee must be paid through a sick leave provision or other paid leave that the employee has available. The second piece of the FFCRA is the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act. This affects businesses and causes them to provide emergency paid sick leave to employees until the end of 2020, where that employee is affected by the coronavirus. Again, it applies to employers with fewer than 500 employees and requires them to offer paid sick leave to those that meet the criteria identified in the Act. Thirdly, the tax credits for paid sick leave in FMLA. This is the mechanism by which employers can fund the first two new obligations. Each quarter, private companies are entitled to fully refundable tax credits for both the paid sick leave and the paid FMLA, and those tax credits are applied against an employer's already owed Social Security taxes. If that offset is not enough to cover these payouts, then the Treasury Department is authorized to help you cover the rest with cash payouts. Fourth, the Emergency Unemployment Insurance Stabilization Act allocates $1 billion to states to build infrastructure in the state's unemployment system to accommodate the expansion of the unemployment insurance program. And it also gives states new flexibility when it comes to workers needing unemployment insurance. You will hear a lot more about those changes shortly from my colleague, Brian Clipville. Before we leave this slide, I want to point out that as of yesterday, every employer is required to post a notice to employees, making them aware of the expanded FMLA and the new paid sick leave under the FFCRA. You can satisfy this notice by posting it in a conspicuous place. It is available to print at the Department of Labor website. You can also satisfy that obligation by mailing it or emailing it or direct mailing it to your employees. Next slide, please. Now to the CARES Act. The CARES Act, as I mentioned earlier, provides over $2 trillion in economic stimulus and aid in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. It is big, it is timely, and it is intended to directly assist individuals, businesses, and state and local governments. The Act, among other things, provides nearly $350 billion for support to small businesses, $260 billion to expand unemployment insurance benefits, and $300 billion in the form of direct benefits to citizens. The Act is organized into 6 titles, as I mentioned previously, 14 sections, and 880 pages of federal code. And today, we will be covering just 4 of the provisions as they relate to business financing and individual benefits. Next slide, please. You may find it unusual to see unemployment insurance used in the same conversation as business financing, but because coverage has expanded to include the self-employed, gig workers, and independent contractors, it is considered to be part of your business financing strategy. So today's focus will include the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, the Paycheck Protection Act, expanded unemployment, and also direct payments to individuals, because similarly, we need to think of each of these as representing a separate piece of the puzzle, and each of these pieces is important to our economic recovery. Next slide, please. I would like to introduce Al Hout, North Dakota District Director from the Small Business Administration, to lead us through the first 2 sections. We're so grateful to Al's partnership, and it's been a delight to partner with the SBA. Again, it's another example of how fortunate we are in North Dakota to have partners who are willing and ready to step up and step in. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Al.
Thank you, Michelle. Next slide, please. The Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program is a direct loan from SBA. It is, the application right now is open online at covid19relief.sba.gov. On this application, it allows a business to request a $10,000 emergency advance, and that is supposed to be issued in 3 to 5 days. So if you need an influx of cash immediately within the next couple of days, you can go onto this website and it's supposed to be able to give you that $10,000 emergency advance. Overall, loans under this economic injury disaster loan program are available through the end of the year. There is a pile of money or a pot of money that will be drawn down on, but we expect that over time this will be replenished by Congress and there should be sufficient funding moving forward. To qualify for this loan, a business has to document supply information to the certification to the website, if you will, that they have been adversely affected by the COVID-19 virus. So you have to certify that your business has been impacted by and negatively impacted by the COVID-19 virus. Funds under this program can cover your payroll, accounts payable, existing loan payments, real estate payments, any general operating need that your business has to keep it going for the foreseeable, for the next few months, if you will. As I mentioned, this is a direct loan from the SBA, so it does have to be repaid, with the exception of there is some stipulations that will allow that $10,000 emergency advance to be forgiven. A lot of people are calling it a grant, but a grant implies that it's free money, no strings attached. There are certain strings attached to this, in that you cannot receive the $10,000 advance and have that forgiven if you want a forgiveness under the Paycheck Protection Program. And I'll talk about duplicative use of proceeds in the future here in one of the next slides. Next slide, please. From an eligibility standpoint, all small businesses, including startups, sole proprietors, independent contractors, as the governor mentioned, are potentially eligible for this program. Businesses and nonprofits, as long as they have less than 500 employees. There are some exceptions that do apply if a business has more than 500 employees, but those are really one-off situations, and I don't want to cover that in much detail. Also, under the revised economic injury disaster loan for COVID-19, is that the business does not have to be operational for 1 year, but it does have to be an existing business of sorts. We've streamlined the application process, the review process within SBA. If you were one of the first people that applied online for the economic injury disaster loan, there was some bandwidth issues with our processing and our web portal. That has been revised. It's now under this new site, and it's streamlined, it's quicker, especially for those that want that $10,000 advance. That review is based on an internally developed SBA credit score, so it just speeds up the application process. Next slide, please. The maximum amount for the economic injury disaster loan is up to $2 million per business. For repayment, because as I mentioned, this portion is a loan that has to be repaid, and the term on that can go up to 30 years depending on the business's ability to repay the loan. If our underwriters look at it and say, after the disaster, your business should rebound relatively quickly, you're profitable, you should be able to repay that loan in 10 years, we'll set the term at 10, but it can go up to a 30-year term. Revised on this program for COVID-19 is that we're not requiring any personal guarantees on loans up to $200,000. For loans above $200,000, we will require personal guarantees of every 20% or more owner of the business. Interest rate for the business is at 3.75, And for some nonprofits, private nonprofits that would qualify for this program, the interest rate's at 2.75%. And again, I can't stress enough, this portion is a loan, so we will require a lien to be placed on assets of the business, and we may require some personal assets if the business collateral isn't sufficient to cover the loan. So when you make a decision, and there's a lot of different programs to consider, in considering if you want to take out the economic injury disaster loan, consider the fact that it is a loan, it is going to have to be repaid over time, and we may require that lien on assets that might prohibit some funding going forward through commercial banks if you're looking at an expansion or things like that. Next slide, please. Portions of the economic injury disaster loan, if you're going through the process and you get your loan approval and you take some funds from the SBA, portions of that can be refinanced into the Paycheck Protection Program, provided you don't duplicate the incentives and the use of proceeds. So what I mean by that is if your business took the $10,000 advance and you're wanting to not have to pay that back, that portion is going to get counted against a potential forgiveness on the Paycheck Protection Program. Also, we're not going to allow a business to finance the same use of proceeds under both loans. As an example, the Paycheck Protection Program is set up for 8 weeks of payroll expenses. A bank can make a loan under the Paycheck Protection Program, give you money to make your payroll for the next 8 weeks. You can't ask SBA under the Economic Injury Disaster Loan to fund payroll for those same 8 weeks. However, there may be a situation where Paycheck Protection Program only covers a certain level of expenses and you need more dollars to cover those expenses, and you might need to cover payroll for 18 weeks instead of the 8 weeks under the Paycheck Protection Program. That's where the Economic Injury Disaster Loan can come in, fund the additional payroll above and beyond what the Paycheck Protection Program is funding, and that would be a loan that needs to be repaid. The application process, as I mentioned, is live at that COVID-19 site. Starts with the $10,000 advance. It's a really short, streamlined application process because we want to get the $10,000 in the hands of the businesses that need it. However, if you need additional dollars beyond that, the SBA's Disaster Loan Processing Center in Texas will come back and ask for some additional documentation to support a larger loan amount and support your repayment ability. And I want to caution everybody today that hopefully your business was profitable before COVID-19, and this is just a minor setback, and all of these programs are available to help you overcome this setback. And hopefully down a month or two down the road, the economy opens back up and things are moving positively in your business again. If your business was struggling before COVID-19, you really should visit with your accountant, your banker, and any other advisors you have on your team and make a decision. Is this the best option for me to go out and access these additional programs, some which are debt, and what will my business look like after this COVID-19 situation? How profitable will I be? Will I be able to take on these additional obligations and make payments on those? What we don't want to see is a business that was struggling beforehand in a deeper hole after the fact. So take some time, review your information with your advisors, and hopefully make a good decision on going forward. Typical time frame for SBA on the full application part is 2 to 3 weeks. If you get approved for the loan, there's no obligation that you have to accept that loan. SBA could approve a loan. You might not like the terms and conditions. You might find a program that's better suited for you and your business. So there is no obligation to take the funding once it's approved and it's available. Next slide, please. And the next program that I'm going to talk about is the Paycheck Protection Program. Next slide again. While the slide is coming up, I want to mention that, as Michelle said, the final guidance is still being developed for this program by the SBA policymakers in Washington. There's a lot of information that's being presented in the news, and different organizations have looked at the 800 and some pages of regulations and made their interpretation on what that regulation says. That's their interpretation. I have to go by SBA's interpretation. I'll also want to thank publicly Michelle Coomer and her staff for developing a lot of the slides and information on the bullet items in preparing for today's session. Michelle says, "We've got this. We think this is what it is." She kept sending it to me. Can you confirm? Can you confirm? Can you confirm? The information we have as of now is the best review of the information we think is available. That is subject to change, and it does change, unfortunately, daily. We made a presentation earlier in the week that had some information, and then we got a little guidance from our SBA policymakers, and that changed, and we'll talk about some of those details in the next slide or two. For the Paycheck Protection Program, and this is really an employee or a worker retention program. Under this program, we want to help a small business keep their employees employed on staff and keep the money flowing into them. These loans are available for small businesses starting possibly tomorrow if you listen to the media, but they'll be available through June 30th. These loans are delivered through a local lender. As a small business owner, you have to take information to support your loan request and present that to your local lender. I'll caution you, give the lender some patience. I know we've had some businesses contact lenders and say, "I want to get my paperwork in so on Friday I can get my money under this program." It is going to take a little time for SBA to complete our final guidance. We're still waiting for that on a local basis. Once the final guidance comes out, we need to share that with the lenders. The lenders need to digest that. The lenders then need to review your application and make a determination if they can sign off on all of the certifications so that they make a loan in good faith. And that's just going to take a little time to review that information and make sure that they're up to speed and in a good position to make good loans. So although the media talks about Friday and maybe the application portal will be open on Friday, that doesn't necessarily mean your particular lender will be in a position to start processing those right away. So I'll ask you to have some patience with the lender. As we've said before on this call and other calls, we're all in this together and we'll get through it together, but it is going to take a little bit of patience. The loan from the lender standpoint is completely guaranteed by the federal government. It is 100% guarantee. It's used for payroll and payroll benefits, some interest on mortgages, some operating expenses like rent, utilities. And if the conditions are met on the loan program, a portion is forgivable and the entire balance may be forgivable. Next slide, please. And we'll talk about that in the last couple of slides of my presentation. The next slide, we talk about the eligibility for the program. It does expand the definition, makes it a little bit simpler for the lenders to review your business, in that for a small business, it's not more than 500 employees. There are some businesses where we allow like under the hotel, hospitality industry, restaurants, where we allow them to look at a singular location and the number of employees within that singular location. That's a one-off exception to this. We also do allow businesses that are operated as a sole proprietorship or an independent contractor, self-employed, to apply for this loan as well. Even though you may not have employees or payroll expenses as such, there is some formulas that are being developed, and again, have some patience with the lender in that we're still trying to develop the guidance and get it to the lender's hand. But there's still some formulas that are being developed that allow a sole proprietorship to count an 8 weeks average income to be used under this program, as opposed to payroll expenses that you may not have as a sole proprietorship. The last bullet item talks about not having an application for duplicative purposes, and that gets right back to the economic injury disaster loan. And this is where, again, you want to sit down and analyze both programs and other programs that are out there that are available to make the best decision as possible. As I mentioned before, duplicative purposes would not be that it's payroll. Both of them are financing payroll, but are both of them financing the exact same payroll for the exact same time frame or time period. So the one loan can finance payroll for the next 8 weeks. The other one could finance payroll for 8 weeks to 12 weeks. The other thing to consider on the use of proceeds is the forgiveness aspect of it. One program, you can forgive the payroll up to 8 weeks of payroll, which might be at a higher amount, versus the forgiveness on the $10,000 that is limited to the $10,000. Next slide, please. On the next slide, we talk about the generally determining the loan amount is typically 2.5 times the average monthly payroll. This is where some of the information gets to be a little confusing. Some of the information on some of the websites talks about 8 weeks payroll plus 25%. It looks like, depending on which site you look at and which information you're reviewing, it looks like it's two different determinations or formulas for calculating a loan amount, a maximum loan amount. Well, when you do the math, you figure it out, it is exactly the same amount. So it gets to be confusing, but the maximum loan amount under this program is limited to either 250% of your average monthly payroll or 8 weeks payroll plus an additional 25%. Maximum loan amount is $10 million. Under this program, we waive borrower and lender fees. There's a credit elsewhere test that we normally require the lenders to do on our traditional 7A guaranteed loans, and we're waiving that to streamline the application process so it goes quicker and easier for the lenders. We also are waiving any collateral and personal guarantee requirements under this loan, and also any prepayment penalties. Maximum interest rate that you as a borrower will pay is 0.5%. The banks are making their income to cover their expenses associated with processing these applications by a processing or a servicing fee that the SBA will pay them after the fact. So it's simple and easy cost effective for you as a business to apply for these loans. Maximum term is 2 years, and we automatically defer the first 6 months payments, so you don't have to make a payment on these loans for at least 6 months, assuming there is the whole loan is not forgiven, or at least a portion of it forgiven. Next slide. As a business, as an applicant under this program, you have to certify that you have been adversely affected by the COVID-19 virus. The bank then has to certify that they've reviewed that information and they are confident that your business was adversely affected and that there's not money readily available to cover your business operations during the interim economic conditions. The funds must be used to retain your workers and a small portion for that operating cost. We also, as part of the certification process, require you as an applicant to certify that you will not use the other economic injury disaster loan proceeds for the same proceeds that you're requesting under this program. Just for a record, and the lender also has to certify that they've reviewed your business and your business was viable on February 15th. Some of the things that I would encourage you to take to your lender once the program is, and once the loan application portal is available, things that the lender's going to need is to, number one, show that you were viable on February 15th. So if you have a relationship with your lender, they already know that. They already have a history of information in their files, so it's not a big deal. But if you're going to a new lender, you're going to want to make sure you take something that shows you're registered with the state of North Dakota as a business. You're going to want to take in some documentation regarding your payroll, maybe some payroll stubs, any payroll information you have in your internal accounting system that can show that's what the number of employees that you've had over the last 12 months and supporting the average monthly payroll for the last 12 months. Having that information prepared in advance is going to help streamline the review process for the bank. You should also have a current financial statement and any other documents to show your current financial situation, including a monthly sales tracking that shows your sales have dropped off in the last few weeks, that can prove the point that COVID-19 has adversely affected your business. Next slide. As we talk about loan forgiveness, the quote here from Forbes magazine says that it's very tricky to determine the actual forgiveness portion of it, and it gets back to what we've been saying, is that the regulations are being developed now, and until we get the final regulations and can actually put a formula to your particular situation, we should just hold tight and have a little patience. You won't know exactly today what your forgiveness portion will be, but we'll get there once the final guidance is issued. Next slide. The forgiveness part of it is we will forgive up to a portion of the loan equal to your payroll costs and payments, the specific operating expenses that were covered, such as your interest on your mortgage, payments for rent, utility payments, etc. I say up to, again, we are still working through the final guidance on some of the nuances of how much we're actually going to forgive and when the forgiveness takes place. any forgiveness amount cannot exceed the principal portion of the loan. So we're not going to give you more than what you got at the beginning from the bank. Any forgiven amount will also be reduced by any reduction in the number of employees that you hire or that you let go, excuse me. And if you've already laid some employees off, we do allow you to bring those back onto your payroll and still qualify for this program. Also, any amounts forgiven will not be included in your taxable income. Often when a loan is forgiven by a lender, it's required that they report that to IRS, and then the individuals have to record that as income. The forgivable loan portion as income. And under this program, it's specifically written into the regulations that loan amount that's forgiven will not be counted against your taxable income. With that, I have the privilege of turning over the program for the next slide to the world's tallest politician, North Dakota Insurance Commissioner, John Godfrey.
Thanks, Al.
You're welcome.
Just want to touch on a few quick points here. Al did a great job of walking through the different resources that may be available to you. And kind of to echo some of what the governor said about not making rash decisions in this time. We understand we're all under stress and we're all trying to figure out what this new world looks like. My one main ask would be to you, if that's you're an employer right now and you are offering benefits to your staff, please continue to do so and utilize the package that was outlined by Al, the PPP and things like that are coming out of the CARES Act to help cover those costs. If you are unable to, if you have any issues about meeting this month's premium payment, or you find yourself in a particular bind while we're waiting for these dollars to come online, you need to talk to your insurance company. We've worked with the insurers in our state to basically request them, and they've assured me that they're going to offer as much flexibility as possible to keep folks on their benefit plan, which is critical during this time. We've got a lot of questions coming from both consumers and small businesses about either furloughing or laying people off. We encourage you as much as you can to use that furlough option where they stay connected, you stay eligible for the PPP, and they keep those benefits going during this uncertain time. Some of the potential flexibility that you may see from your insurance carriers are, extension of payment deadlines. There's grace periods already built into your contracts, and then also on the other side, if you have either laid people off or looking to bring them back on, or if you're meeting new demand now under a current situation, they have been allowing the ability to waive that probationary period. So those new employees, or if they're coming back to your shop, have access to those health benefits immediately. That same level of flexibility is being given for all lines of insurance. So the main ask is that before you miss that premium payment, before you cancel that policy, reach out to your insurance company and make sure you have that discussion, because there are options that are available. These things need to be done on a case-by-case basis, which is why it's so important that you reach out to your company to have that discussion, because the flexibility that may look right for somebody else may not be the one that looks right for you. But again, they're encouraging that contact, and they've assured me that they're willing to offer that flexibility to kind of get everybody through this time as this stimulus package comes on board. Now, one other point is, if you do have to lay somebody off or remove them from employment and they're losing that health insurance benefit, I think there is some responsibility there to let them know what options they have available to them. That's maybe a COBRA plan. They would also qualify for a special enrollment period through the ACA on healthcare.gov or through an insurance agent. One other option is a short-term limited duration plan. These are kind of catastrophe plans or catastrophic plans. They provide some base level coverage that are meant for a short-term period, but under some guidance that we issued previously, they would cover COVID testing, and so that's an important point to make. And certainly, you can always reach out to our office if you've got any questions on this. But the first call is generally going to be to your carrier and see what kind of flexibility is available through them. Like I said, they've assured me that every carrier that's operating in our state is willing to work with companies and employers and individuals through this challenging time, as we know we're kind of waiting for these stimulus dollars to get into the economy so we can make those payments. So Before you make any decisions or before you miss a payment, please just be sure to talk to your insurance company and have that discussion, because there are options available to you. With that, I can turn it back to our Commerce Commissioner, Michelle Comer.
Thanks, John.
Bet.
All right, next we're going to talk about the expansion of unemployment insurance and benefits. As we're all aware, millions of Americans have been laid off or otherwise affected due to this economic downturn. According to the United States Department of Labor, just today, last week alone, more than 6.6 million claims were filed for unemployment, which was double the prior week's record-setting numbers, which brings the total to 10 million Americans who've been affected in the past 2 weeks. Just for perspective, if you contrast these numbers to the pre-coronavirus claims record that was set in March of 2009, it was 695,000. The CARES Act contains a section called the Relief for Workers Affected by the Coronavirus Act, and this act provides for a substantial expansion of unemployment insurance and benefits for workers that are affected by COVID-19. And as I mentioned earlier, it is an important part of financial planning, especially for independent contractors and those who are self-employed, because of the expansion of coverage. So to cover this next section, I'd like to introduce Executive Director of Job Service North Dakota and Worker Safety Insurance, Brian Clipfill.
Good afternoon. I guess it's good morning yet, almost good afternoon. So there's been a lot of work being going on at Job Service North Dakota, and Michelle gave you some numbers as far as nationwide numbers, and I was just going to give you just a little quick update of what's happening here in North Dakota before I get into the additional benefits under the CARES Act. So if you look at at Job Services normal duty, so before the peak last year, our peak is usually like December, January, February, when a lot of people are getting laid off. We were averaging about 67 claims filed per day. During the peak in the winter, when a few more people are filing, we went up to 148 claims filed per day. Prior to March 16th, we were averaging about 84 claims, unemployment insurance claims filed per day. Since March 16th, we've averaged 2,500 claims per day. So it's been just a tremendous increase in the work. So with the passage of the CARES Act by Congress on March 27th and signed by the President, there's several new programs are being implemented to assist workers and business owners through the unemployment insurance system. At this time, Job Service is actively programming our unemployment insurance technology systems to account for the changes that the CARES Act provides. And the United States Department of Labor is currently finalizing and guidance to provide to all of states, and upon receipt of the information, technology program will continue to be finalized. So the programs that we have in place, I'll go through the three main ones. One of them is for individuals not eligible for regular extended benefits or pandemic employment, emergency employment compensation. These would include like independent contractors, self-employed, gig workers. So that's kind of a whole new group again of that are eligible for unemployment. The other program that's been implemented is a program that provides 13 weeks of additional benefits for those individuals that may have exhausted all rights to state unemployment insurance. This primarily will assist those individuals who are seasonal workers laid off in the fall, who have used up all their benefits, but due to the pandemic are not being able to get called back to work. The third program is this program provides for the addition of $600 to each unemployment insurance health benefit made to an individual, whether on the regular unemployment insurance program or any of the new programs within the CARES Act. Job Service is working as quickly as possible to implement these critical income support programs. At this time, as we await federal guidelines and rules, we are not able to provide significant guidance to individuals with questions. Understanding there will be questions, Job Service will update the FAQ, frequently asked question document on our website as information becomes available. Also, we've worked with Michelle in Commerce, where there's going to be a kind of a one-stop place for business for these questions that may come in. So you can go to that site also, and if there's other questions you have, you can go to jobsnd.com for Northwest Job Service website. So when the technology changes are in place, Job Service, we will be posting this information on our website and other social media platforms through Commerce. We're going to try to get the word out. Please refer to these sources on a timely basis for updates rather than call in with questions. And the reason I said that, with this tremendous increase in claims that were being filed, most of the, like 98% of them are filed online, but there still is a lot of questions and stuff being called in to our staff. And we've had to redirect some of our staff to make sure we can handle all those calls in, and still doing a great job, because the last information we had, we have about a 15-minute waiting period, which is phenomenal for all the additional calls that are coming in. So so please refer to our website or other sources before you call in with questions. If you have an employee who does not fall into the employee types noted by the programs that I mentioned above, you can file an unemployment insurance claim immediately at jobsnd.com. And there's a site on there. It's really easy to file, and it's really a good method to try to do it. So the programs, the main two, the one with the that's open up for the independent contractors and self-employed gig workers, and the program where there's 13 weeks of additional benefits for those individuals that may have exhausted all their rights. They'll be required to file a claim when our system gets up and running, where we can handle that, and we're working on that, and we will get that going soon. However, the $600 increase in weekly benefits payments provided by the third program I talked about will be automatically and may not require an additional application or actions by you. So with that, I'll go to the next slide. And we have some examples of how this could be applied. So the first one we have is, the next slide is with the Uber driver. So this is an independent contractor. To get the benefits, when we get our system up and running to accept these types of claims, they must provide proof of past earnings, most likely tax documents. So, example, you'd have a $40,000 annual earnings. That translates to $679 per week, which would be a $384 per week regular UI benefit. Add on that 600 extra per week, which would be automatically added, and that goes through July 31st, 2020. So the unemployment that individual could collect would be $985 per week. Next slide. The next slide is a son of a self-employed plumber, and this person offers services to the public. And so this person must prove past earnings, most likely tax documents. So we'll have a little higher salary there of $60,000 annual earnings. Comes to $1,140 per week, which the UI benefit would be $576 per week plus the $600. So they would be making $1,176 per week. Now these extra programs that we talked about are, have to be COVID-19 related. The two of them, in particular, the one with for independent contractors and self-employed and gig workers, and the 13 weeks additional. And so that's one of the things that we will be looking at when those claims come in. Just one other thing I was going to add, that if you have employees that you have worked for, and they don't have those circumstances listed under the Act for COVID, virus, they do not qualify for benefits under the CARES Act or any other UI benefits. So if you have employees that say, well, I think I can make more money, collecting the $600 extra and being unemployment insurance benefits, and you have work for them, you need to let us know so that we can make sure that those people don't get those benefits, which they're not really entitled for. And the last thing I was going to mention about, Insurance Commissioner Godfrey mentioned that too, but we did have an executive order that we are deferring premium payments for WSI and job service until the end of June. I mean, you're still going to have to pay what you need to pay, but at least we're going to wait for a few months until maybe some of this loan money can get out, and we can and the business get on their feet. But we figured we'd help a little bit in that respect. So next slide. So that concludes my report, and I'll turn it back over to Michelle.
Thank you, Brian. I just want to add one thing that came in on a text while I was listening to Brian, some clarification on whether business owners are eligible for unemployment too, should for COVID-related reasons they have to close their shop. I confirmed over text, just so I'm being accurate, that indeed that is the case. So I just wanted to add that, Brian. Thank you so much. All right, so on to direct payments. The fourth piece of the puzzle that we're covering today is the direct payments to Americans. The CARES Act included $300 billion in direct payments to individuals, and the purpose of that was to mitigate the short-term economic stress that's being caused by the pandemic. Next slide, please. So just a few notes about these payments. First off, they are one-time. The U.S. Treasury Secretary Mnuchin indicated that he expected that these payments would be delivered within 1 month of the date the act was signed, which was last Friday, March 27th. Most adults will get $1,200, and every qualifying child under 17 will get $500. Treasury Secretary Mnuchin indicated that single adults with Social Security numbers who have adjusted gross income of $75,000 or less will get the $1,200. Married couples with no children earning $150,000 or less will receive $2,400. A taxpayer who files as head of household will get $1,200 if they earn $112,500 or less. And above those income figures, the payments decrease until it stops altogether for single people earning $99,000 or married people who have no children and earn $198,000. According to the Senate Finance Committee, a family with 2 children won't be eligible for payments if their income surpasses $218,000. And you are not eligible for a payment if someone claims you as a dependent, even if you're an adult. Next slide, please. All right, this slide is really intended to be an advertisement for next week's session. As I mentioned earlier, with all of the guidance still developing, we were not prepared to provide a scenario or an example under which you would illustrate the effect of the EIDL or the PPP. But as guidance develops over the coming week, that is our intention for next week's session, to provide for some application scenarios to illustrate the use of those resources. But again, not to provide financial advice, only to illustrate how those resources can be applied. Next slide, please. All right, for putting it all together, as you can probably see, there really isn't a one-size-fits-all solution for each business. So we encourage you to think about these resources, as I said earlier, as a puzzle. And you should begin preparing now and work with your financial advisor now to begin to determine your best path forward while the guidance is finalized. We know that it can be unsettling to hear this isn't final and this may change, but we took the risk believing there is benefit in sharing this information with you as it develops, because we think that it will help us act more quickly. I want to remind you that as of today, your financial institutions, your lenders, your bankers don't have final guidance on the Paycheck Protection Program, nor do they have the application materials. The Secretary of Treasury indicated that he hoped that would be this week, but we haven't seen that happen yet. So really what that means to us right now for all of us is that we need to exercise an abundance of patience and grace and cooperation as these things develop around us. And I want you to know that we at the Department of Commerce and the Economic Resiliency Team and across the state of North Dakota are going to be relentless and persistent in pursuit of this guidance so that we can assist you. So I want to make one more comment on those of you that are listening saying, but I need cash right now. So reminding you that as Al mentioned, the SBA Economic Impact Injury Loan does include a $10,000 advance feature. We also encourage you to visit your local lender who may be able to help you with a bridge loan. What a bridge loan means is just that, some temporary short-term financing that you can use until the money becomes available through the SBA and one of the two programs we discussed today. Next slide, please. All right. Well, as I mentioned earlier, please only use trusted resources. There are many articles developing on websites by lawyers and accountants and financial advisors. And we ask that you exercise caution as many of those resources are being developed prior to the final guidance, and they may look instructive, but nothing is until that final guidance is received. So they may contain inaccurate information. I want to remind you as well that anything that's underlined throughout this presentation links to a link that we at Commerce have vetted and fact-checked. We do recommend that you go to ndresponse.gov and select the businesses and employers button. It's there where you will find this PowerPoint presentation, and by this afternoon, you will also find a recording of this call. We do recommend the U.S. Chamber's website, our partners at GNDC, and then the last four links link you to organizations in North Dakota that can help you, that can sit down with you and provide you guidance through this process. Next slide, please. I do want to urge you to document everything. As Al said previously, we're building guidance now. We need you to make sure that you are documenting that, for example, you have not applied for a loan through the EIDL program and the PPP to pay for the exact same expenses. You also need to document that these expenses and needs that you have are related to the COVID-19 pandemic. So I can't overstate the importance of documenting your scenario right now and how it is related to COVID. Next slide, please. All right, a final disclaimer. We've said it enough, but I have to say it one more time. This presentation isn't all inclusive of federal stimulus aid. There are a number of other provisions in the CARES Act. We wanted to provide you information today that related to the immediate financing support. And the information you received today isn't legal or financial advice. Again, we will advise you to consult with your lender and your financial advisor. Many questions remain answered, and we are working as hard as we can to find them. Next slide, please. Well, I want to thank you all 2,200 of you, for joining us today. We want you to know that we are walking alongside you, and we're going to continue to be a resource. We do have the email address that I'll just repeat for you right now. It's businesshelpcovid19@nd.gov. If you email us questions at that email address, they will be used not only as a basis for upcoming presentations, but they will help us design our support materials. Before we go, I want to turn it over to my colleague, Eric Spencer, who's the president and CEO of the Greater North Dakota Chamber of Commerce.
Thanks, Michelle. And thank all of you who are participating today in this COVID-19 business brief. A few minutes ago, everyone who registered received a survey about the session, and we'd encourage everyone to take a few minutes and complete that because as we design these sessions going forward, your feedback is critical to making sure that we're getting out the information that you need to bridge this gap and get through this time together. Next week, our session will be held on the same day and time as today. So that's next Thursday at 11 a.m. Central. The Department of Commerce will announce the topic on Friday, and as Michelle said, it's likely to build on today's session about the CARES Act with real-life scenarios. Registration for the next session will open tomorrow afternoon, and you can register by going to ndchamber.com. Again, as Michelle said, please remember these rules and guidance are still being developed, and some of what you heard today may change. I want to reiterate that the most current updates will be made available at ndresponse.gov. Choose COVID-19 and then click on the Businesses and Employers button. Again, ndresponse.gov, click on COVID-19 and then the Business and Employers button. A recording of this session, as well as the materials from today, will be available at ndresponse.gov as well as on ndchamber.com. Remember again that this presentation contains links to resources that have been vetted by the Department of Commerce, and so please use those. And finally, on behalf of the Greater North Dakota Chamber and the North Dakota Department of Commerce, we thank you for spending some time with us today and look forward to you joining us next week, Thursday at 11 a.m. Until then, please stay safe.
Thank you for joining, everyone. That ends our live meeting.